All right, step into the shadows with me, your wanderer through history, for an explainer that unfolds like a truly dark mythological epic. Today, I'm putting on my theater historian hat to guide you through a legendary power struggle that just perfectly captures the essence of human manipulation. We're looking at the story known as the Bankside Wager. It's this fascinating, high-stakes tale of two absolute masters of their craft, locked in a deadly game of control. Okay, let's really dive into this sensory world. I want you to picture the 16th century gutter slop of Bankside, right amidst that thick, salty scent of the Thames River. It was here, in this gritty, vibrant underbelly of London, that a pox-ridden jester and a sulfur-fueled wizard struck a very dark wager. They stood right before the wooden O of the famed Globe Theatre, basically preparing to test their most dangerous theories on a live, unsuspecting audience.
So this wager forces us to ask the ultimate question about how performative power truly controls the masses. I mean, what's more potent? Is it the hidden structural mechanics of political stagecraft that shape our reality? Or is it the direct, incredibly sharp weaponry of the spoken word that commands our loyalty? Well, the jester and the wizard were determined to find out, using the audience as their ultimate test subjects.
Act 1. The Architect of Ambition.
Now, the globe wasn't just some building made of timber and thatch. In this mythos, it acts as a pulsing, living architect of balanced creation and ambition that literally framed their sinister game. It was a space specifically designed to capture the entire spectrum of humanity, right from the groundlings down in the dirt to the nobles up in the galleries. This theater was the ultimate petri dish for their experiment in social engineering.
What's really fascinating is that both of these men were competing to manipulate this exact concept, the not-self of the audience. The not-self is that performative identity we all wear. It's constructed entirely by social arrangements, artificial roles, and the expectations of everybody else. The jester and the wizard recognize that if you can control a crowd's not-self, you basically control their reality. They didn't see the audience as individuals. They saw them as a collective illusion just waiting to be sculpted.
Act 2. The Duel of Illusions.
And here is where we see the core duel brilliantly mapped out, the Prince of Two Tongues battling the Architect of Illusion. On one hand, we have the jester's linguistic trickery, his weaponized prose, and his cynical deconstruction of honor. And on the other, the wizard's alchemical stage mechanics, his enchanting fires and his uncanny mirrors. They are two entirely different methodologies aimed at the exact same goal, total dominance over the audience's psyche.
Let's unpack the jester's gambit first. The jester wallowed in what the source calls the rotten rind of language. He employed dual linguistic registers, basically pouring out this wild river of weaponized prose filled with the earthy thou and thee. And why? To weave a deliberate web of false intimacy with the groundlings. This was a calculated investment in a base image, ensuring that his eventual rise to power would seem utterly miraculous and radiant to the very people he was manipulating.
Then he took it a step further by deploying something called the Catechism of the Scutcheon. He sharpened his jokes into jagged razors, acting as a completely cynical deconstruction of social standing. He convinced the audience that honor wasn't a virtue at all, but merely a word, a useless funeral decoration. He systematically dismantled the armor of their station.
So, the absolute crucial point here is that his linguistic refraction didn't create true honesty. Instead, it created a devastating blight of revelation. By stripping away their illusions of honor and status, he left the audience entirely vulnerable. They had nothing left but the physical, visceral reality of their own suffering, which of course made them incredibly easy to mold and direct.
But hey, the wizard wasn't about to just lose this wager. Fueled by sulfur and spite, which, let's be honest, is pretty much the breakfast of champions for any 16th century megalomaniac, the wizard countered with structural glue, turning the theater itself into a machine for social engineering. He relied on dark alchemical mechanics, specifically weaving the ignis fatuus, the fool's fire. This acted as a shimmering, invisible veil over the entire theater, literally a mask that disoriented the masses and completely obscured reality.
Within this veil, the wizard employed the art of foil. He used these enchanted, uncanny mirrors to reflect the audience's opposites. By deliberately placing a fiery knight right beside a giant of misrule, he actively shattered the audience's sense of self. He was forcing them to look into a funhouse mirror of their own society, completely destabilizing their understanding of who they were. And to complete his trap, the wizard created a stage of counterfeits. He used hollowed-out puppets, animated by spirits, to act as the jester's scene partners. These animated spirits represented the ultimate unproductive stagnation of the not-self. They proved his truly chilling thesis. In the theater of power, genuine human connection simply doesn't exist. It is just a disposable political asset to be used and discarded.
Act 3. The Thresher of Time.
So, as the great illusion reached its absolute peak, the jester pulled his final, shocking move. He entirely abandoned his earthy, chaotic prose. Instead, he shifted into the highly disciplined, structured music of iambic pentameter, what the source brilliantly calls the verse of command. This sudden shift to poetic rhythm signaled a divine order, an invisible architecture that compelled absolute obedience from everyone listening.
You see, this rhythm wasn't just beautiful poetry, it was a literal weapon. This rigid structure became a crushing weight upon the audience. The verse of command turned the wooden O into a terrifying machine, a thresher of humanity that ground down the individuality of every single person in the room, tightly binding them to the jester's will.
But their struggle for control created a trap neither of them could escape, the labyrinth of time. Inside this labyrinth, their fatal flaw was fully exposed. Just look at this profound contrast. The jester thrived in the chaos of the performance, living entirely in a perpetual now. He only cared about the immediate reaction. The wizard, however, was shackled by his obsession with controlling tomorrow. He was desperately trying to redeem time to secure his own future power, and those competing forces ultimately tore the fabric of their own illusion apart.
Which brings us to the fall. The wizard's obsession with mechanical clockwork sealed their tragedy. The great clock of the theater struck with a heavy, metallic clink of duty. And in that precise moment of rigid finality, a spark caught. A crown of flame erupted, catching both the jester and the wizard, and began to consume the great globe theater.
Now you might think fire is a purifying force. It often is in myth, but not here. This fire offered absolutely no salvation. It didn't lead to some grand synthesis or higher understanding. It led only to total, catastrophic consumption.
And the jester's reaction? As the flames literally roared and the architecture of their ambition collapsed around them, the jester offered no profound final words. He simply let out a rattling joke into the void. His final act was to just laugh in the face of the destruction they had both engineered, which honestly is a perfectly cynical punchline to a disaster caused entirely by their own massive egos.
Epilogue. Ashes of the True Thing.
The ultimate lesson of the Bankside Wager is written right there in those ashes. Because both the jester and the wizard failed entirely to reach the primal honesty of the true thing, because they relied only on manipulation, false intimacy, and counterfeit connections, their hunger for performative control devoured them equally. Power that is divorced from primal truth inevitably consumes both the ruler and the ruled.
It really forces us to look at our own modern stages and the roles we play. If power without truth consumes us all, we have to ask ourselves, are we truly the masters of our own stage? Or are we just hollow puppets burning in someone else's labyrinth? Keep that in mind the next time you encounter a master of words or a wizard of stagecraft. Until our next journey together, ask yourself, whose script are you performing today?